Saskatchewan. Start somewhere inside its borders, pick a direction, and you can drive for hours without ever leaving. A land as vast and varied as its rich history. It doesn't matter where you begin or where you end. It doesn't matter if you're moving or standing still. The place will come to you. It will whisper to you. It will tell you stories. It's a place full of stories. Stories of culture, stories of survival, stories of accomplishment, and stories of people. It will capture your imagination. It will become a part of you. It will move you. Time has a way of uncovering memories long since buried. Sometimes we're in the room when it happens, and sometimes time does it in the middle of the night. Time often has a mind of its own, collecting memories and keeping them safe. It keeps those memories for others to find, for others to gain wisdom from those experiences of the past.
People don't always realize that there were 91,000 men and women from Saskatchewan that enlisted for the Second World War. About 4,000 didn't make it home.
In 1997, pilot Doug Chisholm was asked to photograph an island in northern Saskatchewan. The island was named after a soldier who died in the Second World War. While working on the project, Doug discovered a chunk of history.
And it really got me thinking, well, who was this fella? And what about the rest of these names?
Chisholm recovered the work of the Saskatchewan Geo-Memorial Project, which was started in 1947. The project honors fallen soldiers from World War II by naming northern lakes, rivers, peninsulas, bays, and islands after them.
I've been able to record aerial pictures of probably 3,600 of the 4,000 geographic features. They're all over the north, just to the borders, all contained in northern Saskatchewan. Really beautiful part of our province.
Doug wasn't sure how much interest there would be when he first began to document the landmarks. He soon learned that these sites meant a great deal to the soldiers' families.
I get wonderful letters from families and from people that appreciate the fact that the province names sites in memory of their father or their brother. I've had maybe 1,200 families come in contact with me and send me a picture of their brother or their father or their uncle. And I document where he's buried and how old he was and his hometown and so on.
Doug has also been asked by some families to place a marker at their loved one's memorial site.
Oh, I've probably personally visited maybe 80 sites where I've installed a permanent bronze plaque and taken my video camera along and recorded footage of my visit.
Doug donates his time and effort to this project. Any money that he does get covers cost of fuel and supplies. For Doug, it's not about money. What he treasures are memories that will last a lifetime.
Long buried in the depths of an uncharted cave, the stories of a distant past can be found. The memories are a mysterious stage set within earshot of an even more storied theater. The Badlands, more than just a name, but a time and a place, a curtain revealing a window to a moment where the legends still live.
Saskatchewan is a land of contrasts. In the north, you'll find lush forests and over 100,000 lakes. In its center, wide open prairie. Travel further south, and you'll come upon the rugged beauty and compelling history of the Big Muddy Badlands. Big Muddy was formed by erosion and sedimentary deposits. The result is a unique landscape of hills, caves, and buttes, the most significant being Castle Butte.
It's 60 meters high, and it's 400 meters around the base. It was used as a landmark by the settlers, the outlaws, the Northwest Mounted Police, and the Native people.
The Big Muddy area holds special significance for First Nations people. There are many boulder effigies strewn across the land.
There is a ceremonial circle that's made of stones in the shape of a kidney. It's 60 feet wide and 80 feet long. There's a turtle effigy, and they believe that a chief is buried under that effigy. So the turtle is a symbol of wisdom, long life, and fertility. A buffalo effigy, which the native people made with stones in the shape of a buffalo. This is the only one known in Canada. And so the native people come here about once a year. The first year they came was in 1990. They erected a pole near the effigy, and they put cloths on it of different colors. There was white for the snow or the north. There was red for the sunrise or the east. There was yellow for the sun or the south. There was purple for the evening or the west. There was blue for the heavens and green for the earth.
This area was also home to a key historical event. It was in nearby Wood Mountain, where Sitting Bull and his people took refuge after defeating General Custer at Little Bighorn. Another interesting characteristic of the Badlands are its many caves.
They are formed from the wind and water erosion. There's only one cave that we let people go in because we don't know how deep the other ones are. It consists of sandstone. There's coal deposits, alkali deposits, and clay.
The caves have been used by local wildlife and people. In the early 1900s, gangs of thieves used these caves as hiding places between raids.
That was the most notorious place north of Montana. Some of the gangs were Pigeon-Toed Kid, there was Dutch Henry, there was the Jones Gang. Butch Cassidy, they think, was just a little bit further down from the border, but Sundance Kid was here. They laid out a trail from here to Mexico. Where the caves are was the #1 station of this outlaw trail, they called it.
The presence of gangs led the Northwest Mounted Police to establish a post in the Big Muddy Badlands.
They had long routes from here towards Wood Mountain and as far as Weyburn. So patrolling that area on horseback was really difficult. And of course they had the respect of the people or the settlers around here. And eventually they got rid of the outlaws.
The beauty and history of the Big Muddy Badlands makes for an appealing tourist attraction and a fascinating chapter in the story of Saskatchewan.
From the memories that live in the dark places of our minds, the places we leave things we'd rather not find, we may gain wisdom among the shadows. These long buried moments in time serve as a reminder that the pain can teach us. Without these hard memories, the lessons from history become lost.
It's a ride that lasted for several hours, caused 2 deaths, and hundreds of thousands of dollars of damage to downtown Regina.
In the 1930s, as Canada struggled through the Great Depression, Prime Minister R.B. Bennett created work camps. Young, homeless, unmarried men cleared forests, built roads, and dug ditches in return for food, board, and a wage of just 20 cents a day. Camp workers became dissatisfied and demanded change.
They formed a union called the Relief Camp Workers Union, against the wishes of the government, of course, and complained bitterly about the fact that their choices were limited, their isolation, their wages were not working wages, they were just essentially starvation wages. And many of them, as they left the camp, moved off into BC.
Camp workers protested in Vancouver, but their grievances received little attention from the federal government. They decided to take their complaints directly to the Prime Minister, and the On to Ottawa trek began.
As they headed eastward, the trek gained momentum, and in fact, by the time they reached Calgary, the trek had grown to 1,500. It had grown to 2,000 by the time it reached Regina.
Saskatchewan had been hard hit by the Depression, and people sympathized with the trekkers.
The federal government, which initially said it would not touch the trek, decided to stop it in Regina. They didn't want it going any further.
On June 15, 1935, RCMP were ordered to stop the trek. Leaders of the movement were invited to negotiate with Bennett in Ottawa, while the rest of the trekkers remained in Regina.
There were negotiators negotiating for the breakup of the On to Ottawa trek. On the other hand, there were federal government officials issuing warrants for the rest of the leaders.
Negotiations with the federal government failed, and the trek leaders returned to Regina.
On Dominion Day 1935, the federal government asked the RCMP to execute arrest warrants for the trek leaders, and instead of picking them up on the streets or anywhere else that day, they chose to raid a peaceful public rally on Regina's Market Square on Dominion Day 1935.
The crowd in Market Square consisted of a few hundred trekkers mixed with more than 1,000 other people, many of them women and children. 30 city police, along with more than 300 RCMP, gathered near the square. At 8:17 p.m., a whistle blew, and the police forced their way into the gathering.
The police came out mostly with truncheons and things like that. The RCMP also supplied a mounted troop. One account indicates that women and children were knocked down and trampled by people trying to get away.
People ran from the square and to the streets of the city, where their frustration boiled over.
So they headed down and they smashed a few windows. They did some damage to cars, and they did some damage to, I think, at least one streetcar.
Police then moved in to quell the riot and stop the destruction.
They were firing their guns, and they were aiming at the crowd almost at random and hit many people in the crowd.
One police officer was dead, 17 people wounded, and hundreds injured. The riot caused tens of thousands of dollars in property damage. After the riot, the trekkers disbanded and returned to their homes.
There was a Regina Riot Inquiry Commission. It collected testimony for several months. It saw over 300 witnesses. And in the end, the Regina Riot Inquiry Commission completely exonerated the police and blamed the riot on the trekkers.
The Regina Riot remains a black mark in Canada's history. The government's failure to find a compromise is ironic, given the sacrifice that many trekkers later paid on behalf of their country.
The sad legacy of this is that many of the trekkers went to Spain to fight against the fascists and fought in the Spanish Civil War. Some of them gave their lives up there, and then many others volunteered in 1939 and went to fight for king and country. So despite their disillusionment with how the federal government had treated them during the 1930s, they were willing to wear their patriotism on their sleeve and fight for their country.
In 1967, Canada was coming of age, celebrating 100 years of Confederation. At Montreal's World's Fair, Expo 67, Canada's best was on show for the world. That same year, the attention of the world was focused on Canada for another reason: a heinous mass murder that took place in a small Saskatchewan community. It came to be known as the Shell Lake Massacre. On the morning of August 15, 1967, RCMP officers were called to the Peterson family farm outside Shell Lake. They found a scene of unimaginable horror. 9 members of the Peterson family had been shot to death. James Peterson and his wife Evelyn, along with their children, Jean, age 17, Mary, 13, Dorothy, 11, Pearl, 9, William, 6, Colin, 3, and Larry, 18 months. Only 4-year-old Phyllis survived. It was one of the worst random mass murders in Canadian history. News of the murders swept through the area and quickly spread across the country. The horrific nature of the crime made it news around the world. Fear ruled in Shell Lake. Fathers stayed up all night watching over their families. Farmers supposedly carried rifles with them wherever they went. More than 40 RCMP officers scoured the Peterson farm for clues. Neighboring farms were searched and dog patrols were brought in to pick up the killer's trail. Within days, national media descended on Shell Lake, and the number of RCMP on the case grew to more than 70. An investigation that followed up on the patients recently released from mental hospitals led police to 21-year-old Victor Ernest Hoffman. Hoffman lived on a farm near Leask with his mother and father. Police found evidence implicating Hoffman in the murders of the Peterson family. On August 19th, only hours after the funeral for the Peterson family, Hoffman was arrested. Hoffman confessed to killing the Peterson family. He claimed he heard the devil urging him to commit the murders. Hoffman was tried for murder but found not guilty by reason of insanity on January 11, 1968. Shortly after the verdict, Hoffman was placed in a mental facility. On May 20th, 2004, after spending nearly 40 years in custody, Victor Hoffman died of cancer.
Every good story needs a hero. A good guy to trump the bad guy, the face behind the mask, the answer to the riddle long buried. In Saskatchewan, the story comes with a happy ending.
Our motto is maintain le droit, which is maintain the right, which I think is quite appropriate for a police force.
The Royal Canadian Mounted Police are a Canadian icon. Their story began in the 1870s.
Back in 1870, Canada just purchased from the Hudson Bay Company a vast amount of territory, which became our Northwest Territories.
With the new land came new problems. There were reports of a group of white wolf hunters that had massacred a band of Assiniboine in the Cypress Hills region. Another major concern was the whiskey traders. They came from the American Northwest and established posts in the foothills of Alberta. The most notorious of these was Fort Whoop-Up. In response to the problems on the frontier, Prime Minister John A. Macdonald established the Northwest Mounted Police.
300 members were prepared to engage on the Great Trek west of July 8, 1874.
For 2 months, the wagon train of troops moved slowly westward. It was a treacherous journey, and the men experienced exhaustion and hunger. When the officers had finally located Fort Whoop-Up, the whiskey traders had already fled. However, there was still much work to do.
We consolidated our presence by establishing numerous forts, detachments, and patrols. And it was through these venues that we were able to stop the illicit trades. The wolf hunters were eradicated in Canada, and friendly relationships were established at this particular time.
In 1877, Fort Walsh, located in the Cypress Hills, became the headquarters for the Northwest Mounted Police. The force later moved the headquarters to Regina in 1882. The RCMP headquarters moved from Regina to Ottawa in 1920, but the Regina Division has remained a vital part of the force as a world-class training facility.
Most of the 50,000 men and women who have come through the Mounted Police have done all of their training here at Regina, which is why affectionately it is known as the home of the RCMP.
Every year, cadets from all over Canada arrive at F Division headquarters in Regina to begin training.
Training starts anytime throughout the year. There are continuously troops coming through, and continuously there's troops that are graduating. It's an accomplishment that is known from around the world, and the cadets itself start off and graduate as constables and head out across Canada.
Cadets have much to learn during their 24 weeks of basic training. Their coursework includes instruction in firearms, driving, self-defense, drill and deportment, and applied police sciences.
The training academy itself has been known to be one of the top training academies in the world. Just by delegates coming and reviewing our program has realized that it is by far one of the top academies and training facilities around the world.
The Royal Canadian Mounted Police are regarded worldwide for their integrity and dedication. This impressive reputation was forged at F Division in Regina.
The Healing Lodge is quite different from other correctional facilities.
The Okimaw Ohci Healing Lodge is designed specifically for First Nations women. It's situated in the Cypress Hills, a traditionally sacred place to the First Nations people.
We try and maintain that family environment. My name is Mother. My managers here are aunties and uncles. The staff here are older sisters.
The Healing Lodge also offers educational opportunities and programs designed to help the residents make the transition back to society.
I went through, it was called Spirit of a Warrior, and it was a 4-month program. It seemed like after that program, I have more acceptance of like what I have done, the people I've hurt in my life, and I can make changes and I can change that. Life goes on, but it's how I make it.
Residents of the Healing Lodge are treated as individuals, allowing them to settle important personal issues.
You have elders' teachings, you do sweats, pipe ceremonies, you have feasts, you do it the Indian way.
What we create here is a warm, safe environment where people can take risks, they can be vulnerable, they can work on their own issues without having to worry about other inmates or other staff, what they're going to do.
In only 10 years of operation, the Okimaw Ohci Healing Lodge has shown remarkable success.
In a healing lodge, you go in one person and you come out a different one, ready to live, ready to stand up and admit your wrongs and then move through life.
From the long-buried sad stories of our past come the happy endings of our future. The realization of a dream born from the seeds of doubt. The wisdom applied generously for generations to come.
If you go to other provinces, you will not find this sort of a unique institution that is controlled by Indian people, for Indian people, but at the same time does not exclude non-Indigenous people from being involved in that education.
The First Nations University of Canada, formerly known as the Saskatchewan Indian Federated College, has its roots in a 1960s concept called Indian Control of Indian Education.
There was this move after the close of the residential schools and the integration of Indian students into the public system to take hold of education and attempt to control it both at the elementary levels, secondary levels, and then later the post-secondary levels.
A First Nations post-secondary school could have been created anywhere in Canada, but Saskatchewan had the political climate to make the institution a reality.
The Federation of Saskatchewan Indians saw the importance of this post-secondary education and in 1974 approached the University of Saskatchewan about creating such an institution. At the time, one of the vice presidents of that institution was a fellow by the name of Dr. Lloyd Barber, and he lobbied on behalf of the Federation of Saskatchewan Indians to have that institution created in Saskatoon at the University of Saskatchewan.
Unfortunately, the university declined the proposal. However, a few years later, Lloyd Barber became president of the University of Regina, and negotiations to start a First Nations school began.
The negotiations, as we can see now, worked out, and the college was created with the doors opening in the fall of 1976.
Although the school was at the university, it was a separate entity controlled by First Nations people.
It was agreed that students who enrolled through the Saskatchewan Indian Federated College would be allowed to take courses from the University of Regina. At the same time, it also gave the opportunity for non-Indigenous students to attend the Saskatchewan Indian Federated College and take some of those courses as well.
The school started small with only 7 students and 6 courses relating exclusively to social studies. Since then, the school has grown to approximately 2,500 students, both full and part-time. Course programming has also expanded to accommodate the growing student body and their needs.
We offer degrees at the undergraduate and graduate level in all of the arts, into the fields of science now, social work programs, faculty of education programs, the development of all of these typical programs that you would think of that would be offered by a university, but with that Indigenous spin put on them.
As well as attracting students to the university, the school also strives to bring the programs to students in their home communities.
One of the major initiatives that occurred was the creation of a campus also in Saskatoon and the creation of a campus in Prince Albert to help deliver services off campus so that students, for example, who may be on a remote reserve in northern Saskatchewan can still gain access to that education.
While empowering Canadian Aboriginals, Indigenous students from South America, Europe, and New Zealand are also benefiting from the First Nations University. The university is also working with Indigenous people in countries like Mexico and Australia to build partnerships and help them establish their own educational programs.
The importance of this institution is very paramount for this province, especially if we look to the future, where we'll hear numbers, for example, that 32% of our population could be Aboriginal by the year 2045. And this institution gives them a place that they can come to receive that post-secondary education so that they can be involved in the new economies that are developing across the province.
In celebrating our accomplishments, we should often keep a firm watch upon the place where we buried our sad truths. The mound upon which they lie may stir. It serves to remind us that we need to fail before we can succeed. In Saskatchewan, the lessons are the same, though the stories might be our own.